In today's video, I'll be doing a walkthrough of the March 2021 SAT writing section. I've scored perfectly on back-to-back SAT writing sections, and as I go through this past SAT, I'm going to show the most efficient way to answer each and every question. So with all that being said, make sure to like and subscribe, and let's go ahead and get started. Questions 1 through 11 are based on the following passage in supplementary material, shedding light on the problem. Plant pollinating insects are essential to the reproductive process of many flowering plants, but the numbers of these insects are declining around the world. Interestingly, a 2017 ecological study led by Dr. Eva Knopp suggests that artificial lighting, the modern convenience that illuminates many streets, storefronts, and athletic fields, may be contributing to the decline of these organisms. All right, so in this case, we have our subject, the modern convenience. That's going to be singular, so we need a singular verb, right? In this case, our singular verb would be illuminates. Illuminate would be plural, okay? Are illuminating would also be plural, and have illuminated would also be plural. In this case, we know our subject is singular, therefore we have to have the singular, S. Okay, we know our subject is singular, therefore we have to have the singular verb illuminates, and our answer's got to be A. All right, maybe contributing to the decline of these organisms. Okay, next thing I see, I have a 1 at the beginning of my paragraph. If you ever have a 1 at the beginning of your paragraph, what I recommend doing and what I do is I go find the sentence I have to place. Okay, in this case, I see the writer wants to add the following sentence to this paragraph. Half of the plants in each category were then illuminated during the nighttime hours. So if you're placing a sentence, what you want to think about is what should come before it and what should come after it. Okay, so what should come before it would be some sort of thing describing an experimental setup or listing a first step in an experiment. And then what comes after will be this, right? Half of the plants in each category were then illuminated during the nighttime hours. Keyword here is then. Okay, so I have to have some sort of introduction to the experiment before this and potentially a first step. And then this will follow that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and place this as we read through then. So we have daytime pollinators such as bees and butterflies have many well-documented threats. So Dr. Knopp's team sought to investigate a potential threat to nocturnal pollinators, artificial light. And in this case, for number 2, right, we wouldn't use a semicolon there. Obviously, we're not connecting two independent clauses, so we can't use a semicolon. We do have to have some punctuation, so we obviously can't have C, and we can't just use a comma, right? We're using a colon here in order to introduce, right, or emphasize the fact that it's artificial light, right? The potential threat to nocturnal pollinators is artificial light. We use that colon to introduce that. Next, we have to do so, the team located samples of the thistle plant Cirsium olerceum, which is pollinated by insects in mountain meadows that are ordinarily dark at night. Before the plant's flowering began, some of the plants were covered in mesh bags to outlaw visits from pollinators. Obviously, we wouldn't say outlaw here. Here we have a word choice question, right? We want to match our tone, which in this case is obviously academic. We have mesh bags to oppose visits. No. To prevent visits. Yes. Okay. Ultimately, we want these mesh bags to prevent visits from the pollinators, not revoke visits. We just need them to prevent them. All right. From pollinators, and then we have some sort of punctuation there. We have others were left unbagged. Okay, that's going to be an independent clause. We have an independent clause before here, so we got to connect two independent clauses here. Now, keep in mind, we can change, whether or not this is an independent clause by having a word there. Okay, however, though, does not. Okay, so in this case, we'd have a comma splice, right? So option A is a comma splice, so that's going to be wrong. Option B, by putting in this word well after pollinators with that comma there, that makes this a dependent clause after now, which we can connect an independent clause to a dependent clause. And this is, I believe this is a subordinating conjunction, okay? Which means if we put that after an independent clause, we have that dependent clause following, right? While others were left unbagged, that works, okay? We're connecting an independent clause to that dependent clause with that subordinating conjunction. So B will be our correct answer there. If we look at C, we'd also have a comma splice. And then if we look at D, we would have a run-on sentence where we're connecting two independent clauses together. Okay, so our answer there's got to be B for number 4. All right, next thing that we need to notice, right? We just described the first part of our experiment in sentence 3, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that because we need to point this out because this is very important, right? We discussed the first part. We have some of the plants were covered with mesh bags to prevent visits from pollinators. However, obviously, while others were left unbagged. Now, if we think about the sentence we have to add, right? Half of the plants in each category, we just described a category, okay? We just described a category right there. So that's why our sentence that we're looking to add has to come after sentence 3 then. Okay, we just discussed the category. Now we're saying half the plants in each category were then illuminated during the nighttime hours. We'll just check to make sure sentence 4 then sentence 4 wraps up sort of this experimental setup. So we have sentence 4 says the scientists measured how much fruit each plant produced over the course of its life cycle. Yes, right? That's ultimately going to end up wrapping up this discussion of the experimental setup by now talking about how we're going to end up measuring our results. Okay, so we need to place this after sentence 3 then. So our answer for number 4 would be answer choice C. All right, with that being said, we've answered questions 1 through 5, so let's go ahead and keep moving. So we got question 6 now. Whereas the unbagged plant's fruit production changed significantly with light exposure, the bagged plant saw no such effect. Now right here, which choice most effectively combines the sentences at the underlined portion? Anytime you have a question where you have to combine sentences at an underlined portion, you're going to want to start with your shortest answers first. So in this case, that would be answer choices C and D. So we could just go 1, 2, and then 3, 4. Okay, so we'll start with C. So we have the bagged plants, and keep in mind that we can actually just ignore what was ultimately underlined there. We can kind of start here. Now we have to also pay attention to what we're going to end up continuing our sentence with, which we have to have self-fertilized following whatever our last word is. So we have the pollinators couldn't visit the bagged plants, and those plants self-fertilized and thus averaged only about, and then some sort of statistic there, right? The issue here is that saying and those plants, right, is repeating bagged plants, okay? We're repeating these two ideas, okay? We're obviously referring to the bagged plants. We don't want to just go ahead and say after we say bagged plants and those plants, right? Because that's obviously going to be repetitive and it's wordy, okay? So C is going to be wrong. If we look at D, because they couldn't be visited by pollinators, the bagged plants self-fertilized, right? That's efficient. We're starting with a dependent clause, putting a comma at the end of the dependent clause, and then starting the independent clause, right? So that's not wordy. It's concise, efficient word choice, right? It's all perfect there, okay? Grammatically correct as well. So that'll be our correct answer there, right? B and A, if we look at those will ultimately end up being wordy. I'll go and explain why real quick. We have option B being that they were unable to be visited by pollinators, the bagged plants, therefore. Obviously, we have wordiness here and being that they were, and then also by adding the word therefore. And then if we look at option A, the bagged plants couldn't be visited by pollinators, so the lack of pollinators, once again, we see repetition and wordiness there. All right, looking at question number 7 now. Self-fertilized and thus averaged only about, and then we have which choice provides accurate information from the graph. Okay, keep in mind we want to know what we're looking for before we go to the graph. So in this case, we're looking for the self-fertilized, we're looking for the bagged plants and how much fruit they averaged in the dark versus in illuminated sites. Okay, so dark versus illuminated sites for the bagged plants. Okay, so we have dark sites and illuminated sites for the bagged plants. So this will be data here. We see that they're both close to about 15 here, right, on this scale. And pay close attention to your scale as well. Okay, so since they're both at right around 15, we need an answer choice that shows that. So we have option A, which would be 15 fruits per plant in dark sites, but 85 fruits per plant in illuminated sites? No. B, 15 fruits per plant, whether they were in dark sites or illuminated sites? Yes. And I'll show you why C and D are wrong. Obviously, we have 80 in illuminated, and then we have 100 fruit, whether they were in dark sites or light. So both of those contain statistically incorrect information. Looking at number 8 now, on the other hand, unbagged plants from the dark sites produced an average of 90 fruits per plant, whereas bagged plants that were exposed to artificial light produced an average of 78. So we need to find what ultimate category produced 78 fruits per plant there, right? It says which choice accurately represents information in the graph. So we got to find which one has 78. Okay, so we see 78 is going to be this one right here, right? If we draw this line over, we see that's about 78. So that's unbagged plants that are illuminated. Okay, so we need to show an answer choice that has that. So we have bagged plants that were exposed to artificial light. No. Okay, it's got to be unbagged and illuminated. So we got, this is question 8. Okay, so A's off. Okay, it's not bagged plants, so B's wrong. C, unbagged plants from the illuminated sites. Yes, that'll be our correct answer. Okay, going to number 9 now. Okay, we have which choice best transition to the paragraph that follows. Okay, so we'll go ahead and finish our reading of this paragraph. We have from these results, the researchers concluded that nocturnal pollinators were avoiding the unbagged plants in the illuminated sites. Then we'll have something there. If we scroll down, the scientists also found the decline in nighttime pollination visits coincided with a decline in visits from daytime pollinators. Okay, so now we're indicating a transition. Okay, we were initially focused on nighttime pollination. Now we're talking about daytime pollinators. Let's read on to see if that continues. And also, before we do that though, we can go ahead and answer 10, right? We obviously are going to end up seeing that this is pretty much an idiom question, right? And also dealing with, understanding the correct meaning of verbs here. Okay, when we say something coincided with, it means that obviously in this case we're talking about nighttime pollination visits versus visits from daytime pollinators. When we say that those two coincided together with a decline, right, coincided with, that's perfect because it's showing that they're related, right? Saying presents in doesn't show that they're related. Saying presence of doesn't show that they're related. And saying presence in also doesn't show they're related. Saying that they're coincided with, right, a decline in nighttime population visits coincide with a decline in visits from the daytime pollinators, that's showing that they're related, right? That the two coincide with each other. Okay, so A is perfect. Okay, now reading on. The precise cause for this dual decline was unclear. One possibility is that the plants were less nourishing to daytime pollinators when no longer visited by nighttime pollinators. So we see that we're going to continue this discussion of the daytime pollinators. So in our transition, we have to, oh, hang on. I answered 11 instead of 10. Sorry about that. Let me go up here. Okay, so number 10, we have coincided with, right? Obviously, that will be our correct answer for all the reasons I've already explained. If we look at B, coexisted to, okay, we wouldn't say a decline in nighttime pollination visits coexisted to. That's not idiomatic. And then corresponded for, also not idiomatic. Correlated in a decline, we would also not say that. We would say correlated, potentially correlated with, but correlated in would be not idiomatic. Okay, so our answer there has to be A for number 10. All right, sorry about that, but we can also go back to number 9 here and we can answer that. So like I said, we need to indicate a transition to the daytime pollination discussion now. We have option A, which affected overall yield of plants. No. B, but these pollinators were regularly visiting the unbagged plants in the dark sites. But these pollinators were regularly visiting the unbagged. Okay, once again, no indication of us transitioning to daytime. C, also no indication of us transitioning to daytime. And then D, we'd start that discussion of the daytime pollinators there. So that's providing that transition. All right, going to number 11 now. Whatever the reason, artificial illumination clearly has adverse effects on plant pollination and increasing presence. Okay, keep in mind that when we're saying presence of artificial lighting, it's not presence like you would get at Christmas. So A and B are wrong. They're the wrong homophone. And we also wouldn't say in the increasing presence in, we would say in the increasing presence of artificial lighting. Questions 12 to 22 are based on the following passage and supplementary material. Benefits of dress code flexibility. In July 2016, the coffee shop chain Starbucks instituted a new policy to relax its dress code. The decision allowing employees to customize their previously uniform looks with such accessories as hats and colorful socks. And then we have some sort of verb here, workplaces across the United States. Well, it's not going to be reflects workplaces across the United States because obviously if you're going to reflect a workplace, you pretty much have to be a mirror. So that doesn't make sense. And then we have options B, C, and D. We see C and D are really wordy here. So we're going to look at B next. Reflects a trend in workplaces across the United States. Obviously that'll be a correct answer. We wouldn't say reflects a new trend or tendency because trend and tendency mean the same thing. So that'd be repetitive and redundant. And then D is reflective of a new national trend. Okay, once again, that's obviously going to be really wordy compared to B, right? B obviously says that much more concise. Okay, so our answer there would have to be B. All right, and then we have another thing too. When we say national trend, we also say across the United States, right? And that's going to be repetitive or redundant there as well. All right, number 13 now. From retail services to large corporate offices, employers are finding that flexible dress codes can make a company more attractive to potential workers. Okay, that's an independent clause. And then we have boosting morale among current employees. Okay, that's not an independent clause, so we can't use A, no change there, because we'd be connecting we'd be connecting an independent clause to a non-independent clause with a semicolon. You can't do that. And then B, workers, additionally, they can boost. Okay, that's really wordy, so we wouldn't use that. Also, it results in a comma splice since we'd be having an independent clause after the first one. And then C, we have workers period and boosting. We wouldn't want to do a period and then do and boosting. That doesn't make sense. And then option D, we have that can make a company more attractive to potential workers and boost morale among current employees. Yes, that's perfect. Why? Because it's connecting the fact that it will boost morale among current employees to what started out and explaining that subject. So that subject is then applying to both the making the company more attractive to potential workers and boost morale among current employees. So that obviously works perfectly grammatically. Okay, options A through C are all incorrect grammatically. Our answer there's got to be D. All right, looking at number 14 now. Okay, there are a number of reasons why job applicants might favor companies that allow for some degree of flexibility in workplace attire. Having the option to dress casually can mean greater physical comfort. Also, being able to personalize otherwise identical uniforms with unique flourishes can enhance happiness by allowing, in this case, them. We don't know who it's referring to. Okay, we have a pronoun there, but we don't know who it's referring to. In this case, it can't be them, it can't be him or her, it can't be the flourishes. It has to be the employee, so we know who we're referring to there. Okay, allow the employees to retain a greater sense of personal identity in the workplace. Going to 15 now. We have individuals' motives. In this case, we're kind of dealing with apostrophes, right? Individuals is obviously going to be plural. Okay, so that apostrophe has to come after the S because they do own the motives. So anything with the apostrophe before the S we can get rid of, and anything without the apostrophe we can also get rid of. So we end up with our answer there as A. Okay, individuals is plural. We put the apostrophe after it. Motives doesn't own anything, so it doesn't get an apostrophe. Okay, so individuals' motives may vary, but job recruiters are finding that many potential employees do indeed share a preference for flexible dress codes and are embracing this preference could help companies attract a wider range of talent. According to a 2016 study, and then if the writer wants to set up the information that follows in the sentence with an accurate interpretation of the data in the table, which choice best accomplishes this goal? So we need to read on to see what we're going to look for. Blank of those surveys wanted to be employed by a company with a relaxed dress code. Okay, and then ultimately we go on after that to sort of give examples it looks like. Okay, so what percent of those surveys wanted to be employed by a company with a relaxed dress code? Let's see. Okay, so here we have the percentage of people who want a formal dress code. So that's not something we're going to consider here. And then if we look at our next two, we have, I would prefer to work at a company that has a business casual dress code. Okay, so that would be relaxed. Okay, so we can include that. And then our next one, I would prefer to work at a company that has a casual dress code or no dress code. That would also be relaxed. Okay, so relaxed dress codes would include these two categories. So 31 plus 27, that would give us 58%. Okay, so let's find an answer choice that represents that. It's not going to be all. It's not going to be fewer than a quarter. Option A, no change, would be none. We know it's not none, or not essentially none. So we know it's going to be more than half because it's 58%. Okay, so our answer there would be D. Let's keep reading. Okay, we have 31% of respondents reported that they would prefer a company with a business casual dress code, and a further 27% reported that they would prefer a casual dress code or no dress code at all. Now we have, at this point, the writer is considering adding the following sentence based on the information from the table. Only 18% preferred a more formal dress code at work. Should the writer make this addition here? Well, if we think about what our main claim is of this paragraph, which is what you want to do when you sort of think about whether or not you want to add a sentence, it's one of the things you want to do at least. In this paragraph, right, our whole claim is that, in order to attract more employees, having a flexible dress code will increase the amount of employees who want to work there. So we need an answer choice that represents that, right? And does adding this ultimately add to that claim? Does it support that claim? It does, because it's showing only 18% of people want a formal dress code. So thus 82% don't. Okay, so does this support our claim? Yes, so we do want to keep it, or we do want to add it. And in this case, if we look at option A, yes, because it provides additional evidence that supports the writer's argument, that's perfect, right? That's really all it's doing. It's just adding on evidence to what, the other evidence is sort of, already there. We're just adding more evidence onto that. If we look at B, yes, because it refutes an opposing point of view referred to elsewhere in the passage. No, okay, we don't want to add it because it's refuting an opposing point of view. We want to add it because it's adding evidence to our argument, okay? So that would be why our answer is A for 17. If we move on to number 18, in addition to making companies more appealing to potential employees, and keep in mind that this is an introductory modifying clause, so what comes after it should be something like dressing casually, right? Dressing casually would work there. We have the option of instituting a flexible dress code. So really all of these look to have that, modify, or what is being modified after. So we're asked which choice effectively introduces the main idea of the paragraph, so we got to read on. Okay, when the accounting firm Crowe Horwath LLP asked workers what changes they would like to see in the workplace, keep in mind that's a dependent clause. Okay, so that has to have a comma after it for 19. So anything without a comma there we can get rid of, so we can get rid of C. And then we have keep in mind also, since it's a dependent clause, we don't need to have and after it, so we can get rid of A. Okay, we also don't necessarily need to have while there. Okay, we wouldn't want to have a dependent clause and then go into another dependent clause. That wouldn't make sense, so our answer has got to be B. Okay, workers said that dressing casually would help them most with, and keep in mind, since we are introducing a quote here, the reason that we don't need a comma, right? A lot of people think that, a lot of people would put a comma there. The reason we don't here is because we're not, going from a verb. When we use the word with here, that's taking the place of a comma, okay? So by using the word with there, we don't need to have a comma after it. So therefore, our answer there would be B, okay? We definitely don't need a semicolon. We definitely don't need a colon, so obviously those would be wrong, and obviously A is wrong because we don't need to have a comma there since we're going straight into the quote, and it's really just part of our sentence, right? And since it's part of our sentence, and we're introducing it with, we don't need to have the comma there. All right, so then moving on, we got 21, okay? So I'll go ahead and read down to there. So, would help them most with being comfortable, being engaged, being productive, said Chief People Officer Julie Wood. The firm started allowing workers to wear jeans and other relatively casual attire, and the response from employees was overwhelmingly positive. With our change in dress, the level of excitement and feedback from our people has been really phenomenal, Wood said. Keep in mind, we can go back now and answer 18 now that we've read through the rest of this paragraph. So what's the main idea here? Well, the main idea is relaxing dress codes, or dressing casually, is going to improve performance of the workers because they're more comfortable. So we have option A, dressing casually can be a fun way to express one's individuality. No. B, relaxing dress codes can help businesses broaden their customer bases. No. C, foregoing formal work attire can also result in fewer conflicts between coworkers. No. And then D, instituting a flexible dress code can also improve current employees' morale, or in other words, make them happier, right? They said if they're more comfortable, they're going to be more engaged, more productive. Okay, they obviously want this because they've been talking about it, throughout this paragraph, right? The level of excitement and feedback from their people has been phenomenal. In other words, it's boosting employees' morale, right? Now, if you look at question number 21 here, of course, formal workplace attire is, and then we have something underlined here, and even required in some contexts. Okay, so we're talking about how formal workplace attire, can't be thrown out. It does still have a necessary place in the world. So we wouldn't say formal workplace attire is admissible, right? We want to show that it's still important, right? It's required in some context and appropriate in some context, so our answer would be A. We're not saying that it's unexceptional. We're not saying that it's genuine, okay? C and D are really far off in terms of B, saying that it's admissible. Our claim here isn't that it's admissible. We're claiming that it's pretty much necessary or appropriate in some cases. So our answer there would be A. Now, if you look at 22, we need to have a sort of transition between this previous sentence here and then this next sentence. So for example, job interviews and client meetings often require professional clothing. And then we have in certain occupations such as law enforcement, uniforms without personal embellishments are still necessary. Okay, so the sentence before is giving an indication of why formal attire is necessary, and a sentence after is giving another indication of why formal attire is necessary. So if we're adding on to two things, we'd be looking for something like in addition or furthermore. Okay, furthermore is perfect here. We're not contrasting, so however it isn't going to be a good answer. Conversely, also, we're not showing something as a converse or contrasting it all, so D doesn't make sense, and it's also not an incident. Okay, our answer there would be B. Questions 23 to 33 are based on the following passage. Or hang on. All right. Questions 23 to 33 are based on the following passage, the filtered net. Search engines make it easy for us to keep up with current issues, but the information we find may not be as objective as it appears. Many search engines collect data from users, such as their locations and search histories. Okay, and in this case, the big thing that's jumping out to me is I saw that I had this comma before such as, and then I see that I could remove everything I'm about to highlight and still have a complete idea. Okay, so in this case, I see that I have a non-essential phrase or clause that I can just take out. Okay, in this case, it would be many search engines collect data from users. They use what they gather to filter search results. Okay, so in this case, I see that I would have to have that comma there. Okay, so I have to have a comma after history. So if I look at my answer choices, I can get rid of B. I can get rid of answer choice C because there's no comma there either. So then I'd be between A and D. The next big thing is that I have two independent clauses. Okay, and since I have two independent clauses, one of them being they use what they gather to filter search results, and the other being many search engines collect data from users. Okay, since I have two independent clauses, I have to connect them with a comma and a fanboy. I can't just use a comma because that'd be a comma splice. So my answer's got to be D for 23. All right, looking at 24 now. The invisible customization may create what media CEO Eli Pariser has termed a filter bubble, a biased worldview that is, and then we'll have some sort of word here. Okay, in this case, I see all my meanings are a little bit different, so that's really not dealing with tense or matching my number of my subject to verb. It's just really meaning there. When it is consistently confirmed rather than challenged. Well, a biased worldview is going to be what when it's consistently confirmed rather than challenged? It's going to be reinforced. It's not going to be enlarged. It won't be defended and it won't be emphasized. Okay, when we're just feeding someone information they agree with, obviously that's going to reinforce their biased worldview. Okay, so our answer there would be A. All right, moving on. We have it is important, especially with regard to political issues, that search engines make their filtering practices explicit. In this case, I'm asked to combine these sentences at the underlined portion. Okay, I see that what I have to lead into is users can be aware of potential biases when making important decisions. I'd probably want to have so that in front of there, okay? Or some sort of indication that the goal of making the practices explicit is so users can be aware of potential biases. Okay, also I want to eliminate as much redundancy as I can. I already said search engines. I'd rather not say it again. So if we look at our options, we have answer choice D, which already looks really wordy, right? We have explicit. This is an outcome that helps ensure, okay, saying this is an outcome. That's wordy, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of D. If we look at option B, which is also very long, we have which has the result that, once again, saying which has the result that, right? That's also very wordy. Okay, we could pretty much just get rid of all of that, right? And then if we look at A, explicit, whereas users can be aware. Okay, we're not contrasting here, so we wouldn't use whereas. That wouldn't make sense. Okay, and then we see our answer C, explicit, so that, which is perfect, right? We want, it's important that search engines make their filtering practices explicit so that users can be aware of potential biases when making important decisions. As we can see, C would be perfect there. Okay, looking to 26 now. Especially when those decisions, and now we're asked which choice best sets up the main argument of the passage. In this case, we have to read on before we can answer 26, so we'll come back to it. All right, psychologist Robert Epstein has shown how filtered results can lead to political biases. There's no need for any punctuation there. Okay, we're not splitting up an independent clause from another independent clause. There's just no need for punctuation. All right, in an experiment conducted before 2014 election in India, Epstein created a fake search engine and asked 2,000 undecided voters to use it for to research candidates running for the office of prime minister. Voters were divided into 3 groups, and each group was presented with results favoring a different major party candidate. Participants whose searches favored a given candidate, and this has to be were. Okay, how do I know that? Well, I know that I have a plural subject in participants. Okay, so I have a plural subject, therefore I need to have a plural verb. Okay, was is a singular verb, so I can get rid of that. Okay, has been, that's also singular. I can get rid of that. Okay, if I look at are, okay, that is plural, but in this case, we have to keep in mind that this is past tense, right? Participants whose searches favored a given candidate. Okay, this has already occurred. Since it's past tense, we can't use are. Okay, so our answer there has to be were. Okay, so they were 12% more likely to report a positive view of that candidate than were participants in other groups. While there is no evidence that commercial search engines intentionally skew their results in favor of certain candidates or positions, okay, that's a dependent clause. Keep in mind that I know that because I'm starting with a subordinate conjunction. Okay, so at the end of this dependent clause, then, I need to have that comma there. Okay, also, in this case, well is pretty much making it so I don't need to have however, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of B and D. Okay, so then if I look at my options, I have option A versus option C. C doesn't have that comma, therefore my answer for 29 would be A. Well, there's no evidence that commercial search engines intentionally skew their results in favor of certain candidates or positions. Filters based on users' browsing history. Keep in mind that we have multiple users, so the apostrophe has to come after the S here. Okay, also there does have to be an apostrophe because they do possess the browsing history. And also keep in mind, histories doesn't own anything, so we can't have an apostrophe after that. So our answer there would have to be answer choice D for number 30. Now that we've read this next paragraph, we can go back up and we should be able to answer 26. Okay, so which choice best sets up the main argument of the passage? We want to talk about what it looks like right now is that we want to talk about something political. Okay, if we read on and we find that that's not the case, we can come back and change our answer for 26. But usually you should be able to probably answer it after you've kind of gone through that next page. So we have option A, especially when those decisions are shared with friends and family members on social media. Okay, in this case, when we're talking about the reason that search engines should make it explicit that users have these biases. Okay, we're not talking about that because it's shared with people online. So A would be incorrect. B, it's made on misleading statistics online. No. C, it impacts civic duties such as candidate selection and voter opinion. Yes, right? That's the focus of this next paragraph. Okay, and which we're kind of assuming here is the setting up the main argument of the passage. If it's not, we'll come back and we'll re-answer 26. Okay, and then D, have long-term effects that may not be easy to measure. Okay, we haven't made that claim yet. If we do, and that becomes the main focus somehow, we'll come back and re-answer it. Okay, and realistically, I probably should have waited to answer 26, but if we find it changes, we can always come back and change our answer there. All right, 31. Which choice provides the best transition from the previous paragraph to the information that follows? I'm going to reread that last sentence just so we have a good idea of what we're transitioning from. In this case, we have, while there is no evidence that commercial search engines intentionally skew the results in favor of certain candidates or positions, filters based on user browsing history could produce similarly slanted results. Okay, so that's obviously bad. Then we have this option here. This possibility is especially troubling, so something bad being troubling, that looks good, because most users think their searches display the full spectrum of perspectives on an issue. Yeah, that works. I'll go ahead and show you why B, C, and D are incorrect as well here. B, the study therefore appears to contradict the idea that most users think their searches. We're not really having, you can't compare those, right? That wouldn't make sense, right? Comparing that study and then contradicting it with this idea that users think that their search results display the full spectrum of perspectives on an issue, that just doesn't make any sense here. Okay, if we look at C, election outcomes are nevertheless unaffected. In this case, that really shouldn't be our focus of this paragraph, but we can read on just to make sure. We have the vast majority of participants in Epstein's experiment, 99.3%, did not recognize the bias in their results. And then we have politicians hope to counteract this. That doesn't make sense so far. We'll read on, though, to see what we're introducing. A 2012 survey from the Pew Research Center indicated that 66% of respondents believe that results obtained through a search engine represented all available information rather than a personalized selection. Okay, what's that ultimately doing? It's ultimately, supporting what we just said previously, people not recognizing the bias in their results. So that's what we need to look for an answer for 32. So we have mitigating factors. That wouldn't make sense. C, and this finding was by no means atypical. In other words, this finding is similar to the one before it. So our answer there would be C. Okay, next thing, we can go back up, talk about 31 now that we've read the rest of this paragraph. Okay, saying election outcomes are nevertheless unaffected. We don't make that claim in this paragraph, so that doesn't make sense. D, search engine designers assume that most users think their searches display the full spectrum of perspectives on a issue. Okay, we got to keep in mind that doesn't really, we're not focused on the search engine designers here. Okay, so that doesn't make sense because we're not focused on that in this paragraph. Also, that doesn't transition well from our previous paragraph. All right, looking at 33 now. Okay, we have filtering is essential to search engines because the sheer volume of information on the internet makes it impossible to display more than a small portion of all relevant results. But in the case of political information, it is important for users to be aware of the existence of filters and of the factors that might bias results. If search engines publish this information, now we're asked if the writer or if the phrase underlined should be kept or deleted. Okay, keep in mind we would adjust the punctuation as needed. So let's go and read on. Users would be better able to read political coverage online with an appropriately critical eye and thus base their political beliefs on a fuller range of information. Okay, In this case, when we use this underlined portion, what we're ultimately giving is a potential solution. So I'm going to look for an answer choice that says we should keep it because it's offering up a potential solution. We have option A, kept because it introduces an additional point about filter bubbles that's developed in the paragraph. We don't develop this, we just kind of offer it as a quick solution at the end. B, kept because it supports the passage's argument about search engines by offering a potential solution. Yes, that's perfect. If we look at C and D, right, we're not going to want to take this out because it is supporting our argument with this idea of having the solution of search engines indicating that the results are biased based on the user preferences. Oglala Lakota art gets rolling. A 2015 study led by the First Peoples Fund, an organization dedicated to supporting indigenous artists, revealed that roughly 4 out of 10 households, keep in mind that we obviously are going to see that we have a non-essential phrase or clause here. Okay, that's pretty clear. Hopefully you recognize that. How did I recognize that, right? Well, I saw a comma right here. Okay, anytime I see a comma that's not separating two independent clauses, immediately I'm thinking that it's probably, or at least it could be, a non-essential phrase or clause, and I need to look for that. In this case, we're ultimately describing what the First Peoples Fund is with this non-essential phrase or clause, right? An organization dedicated to supporting indigenous artists. If we were to take it out, obviously the sentence would still make sense. Therefore, we have to have that comma after artists, so our answer there is going to be D for 34. Okay, let's keep reading. 4 out of 10 households on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota had home businesses centered on arts or handicrafts. This finding reflects the deeply rooted importance of art within the preservation's Oglala Lakota culture. However, the study also concluded the vastness of the reservation limited local artists' ability to collaborate with one another, find mentors, and sell their art. Next, I'm going to have some sort of transition here. Okay, so we'll see what follows. We have First Peoples Fund worked with a group of organizations and supporters to implement a plan for strengthening the creative economy of the reservation. Keep in mind, in our previous sentence, we talked about the results of a study indicating that these indigenous artists struggled to sell their art. So we need an answer choice that sort of connects that study to First Peoples Fund's work to solve this. We have option A, regardless of their discoveries. No. B, with its headquarters. Okay, we don't care where its headquarters are here. C, in light of the study's results. That's perfect because it's connecting them, showing because of the study's results, the First Peoples Fund is now working to improve upon the ability for artists to sell their work. Okay, and founded in 1995, that's not connecting these two sentences. Going to 36 now. The outcome of the organization's combined efforts, okay, in this case, it would have to be has if it was going to be in this tense. The reason why is because the outcome is our subject here, okay, and I want to quick point something out here. When we have a prepositional phrase like of the organization's combined efforts, okay, we have to keep in mind we ignore that when determining the number of our subject. Okay, so we ignore everything I just highlighted in orange when determining the number of our subject. The outcome is singular, singular. So we need a singular verb. If we look at our verb choices, option A, plural, so we get rid of it. B, plural, we get rid of it. C, are, okay, also plural, so we get rid of it. Okay, and then we see our answer has to be D. Okay, the outcome was rolling res arts, a bus that would serve as a mobile space. So we see our answer is going to have to be answer choice D. All right, moving on now. We have a bus that would serve as a mobile space to support artistic collaboration and forge critical partnerships with local finance institutions. We're asked which choice best states one of the main points of the passage. In order to determine the main point of the passage, we need to read on. All right, so we have Rolling Res Arts itself was a collaborative work of art by Oglala Lakota artists, Donald Montaleo, and then we have 38, which choice provides information about Montaleo that best supports the paragraph's discussion. So we got to read on a little bit. So Donald Montaleo was selected to give the bus a distinctive appearance. He created a lavish design for the bus. This design, I don't want to say that again, that's repetitive. And then we see that we're going to end up combining these sentences. Okay, intended for the sides of the bus. I don't want to repeat bus again. Okay, in this case, since we're talking about his design being for the sides, whereas up here we just said for the bus, I'd want to get rid of that somehow. Had vivid pictograms of running buffalo inspired. Okay, and then we have by the narrator scenes, so I'm probably going to need to keep inspired in my answer choices for what I'm ending with, my ending word. So we have option A for the bus, and actually I'm going to go ahead and start with B because we're combining sentences. We want to start with the shortest one first. So we have sides of the bus. Okay, so created a lavish design for the sides of the bus with vivid pictograms of running buffalo inspired by the narrative scenes of ledger art. That's perfect. Okay, our answer there is going to be B. It's efficient. It's not wordy. It's very concise, right? It avoids all repetition and redundancy. Okay, so B is perfect. It's very clear. The other answer choices are not clear at all. All right, looking at 38 now, if we go up, okay, we see that we have which choice provides the given information about Montaleo that best supports paragraph's discussion. Obviously, he's the one who's painting this. Okay, so we need to discuss that. We have option A, that fact that he was inducted into the South Dakota Hall of Fame. We don't care about that. We want to focus on the aspect of the art itself that he did for this particular piece of ledger art. We have B, a practitioner of the traditional Plains Indian art and a form known as ledger art. Yes, that's perfect. It's introducing the fact that he does ledger art before we introduce this discussion of him making these narrative scenes of ledger art. So B is perfect. If we look at C and D, I'll show why those are wrong as well. C, an artist whose work has been featured in galleries in New Mexico, Minnesota, and Arizona. No. Okay, we don't care about where he made art before. D, a cover illustrator for several books. We don't really care about that either. All right, number 39, we already answered. We go to 40 now. After Montaleo produced drawings of the design, an Oglala Lakota graphic artist adapted them to fit the bus, helping transform its. Keep in mind that we're referring to the bus, okay, which is obviously an object that is singular. Okay, so its would be perfect there. Okay, keep in mind also this is the correct its. Okay, so we see our answer there would be answer choice A. Moving on to 41 now. With the eye-catching collaboration complete, the bus was ready to begin journeying across the far-flung communities of the reservation. The bus's versatile interior allows artists to work together on projects, study with mentors, and even set up bank accounts to help grow their art as a business. The bus also hosts a gift shop whose manager buys work on site to sell elsewhere along the bus's travel. Then we have enhancing versus exalting, embellishing, and exaggerating. In this case, we have artists' ability to benefit financially from their art. Okay, by being able to sell art, elsewhere, that's enhancing their ability to sell the art. It's not exalting it, it's not embellishing it, and it's not exaggerating it. Answer choices B through D all really make about no sense, so that one's pretty clear. It's going to be A. 42. We have local artist and rancher Tony Richards. We don't need to have any sort of punctuation there. Okay, no need for any punctuation. We can go ahead and get rid of answer choices A, C, and D. Our answer's got to be B. Okay, when we just talk about, who someone is, like local artist and rancher Tony Richards, okay, nothing is non-essential there. Nothing needs to be split up with commas. We can just go straight through, no punctuation. All right, next up we're going to have, I'll go ahead and finish reading through this, right? So we have, used to have to drive more than an hour to reach a local cultural center where he sold his jewelry at the gift shop. A lot of the times I didn't have time to go over there, Richards said. Now with Rolling Res Arts, the shop travels to him. Okay, well, the organizations behind the project ultimately aim to open a permanent art space and gallery on the reservation to serve as a fixed cultural hub. Okay, keep in mind that I have well to begin. That's a subordinating conjunction indicating to me that what I have to open is a dependent clause. Since I have a dependent clause, I need to have a comma after that. Okay, so my answer has to have a comma there. We don't need to have and because we're not splitting up an independent clause from an independent clause. Okay, and then we, like I said, don't need to have and well again. Okay, and then option A of no change. We don't want to use a semicolon because we had a dependent clause. So our answer there's got to be D. Okay, if we have a dependent clause at the beginning of the sentence, we want to have a comma at the end of that. All right, next thing we have. We have the art in motion of Rolling Res Arts will continue. Now the writer wants to incorporate a direct quotation into a conclusion that summarizes and reflects upon the main idea of the passage. And keep in mind that we have to still go back and answer that one question as well. So let's actually go ahead and do that now. Okay, the question that dealt with, I believe it was like the main purpose or the main idea, right? So question 37, which choice states one of the main points of the passage? We have option A, forge critical partnerships with financial institutions. No. B, create new commercial opportunities for artists in the area. Yes, that's ultimately the point here, right? C, provide access to computers. No. And then D, offer entrepreneurship classes. No. Okay, so we see our answer for 37 then. It's going to have to be answer choice B. Now that we answered that, we'll go answer 44 since that's our last question. Okay, so we need to wrap this passage up with a quotation that summarizes and reflects on the main idea. We have option A. Of as Warren Gus, yellow hair, an artist trainer for the First People's Fund said, what I do is contact some of the established artists and utilize some of their skills. We want to focus on the artists being able to benefit from their work selling, okay, the economic aspect. We have option B. Jeremy Stab, the program manager of First People's Fund, said that part of the success depends on thinking about asset building, that is determining how to get residents comfortable with banking. Once again, the focus isn't on banking, so B is incorrect. C. Brandy McDonald, the former program manager of First People's Fund, said Rolling Res Arts provides access to capital, okay, so them being able to sell their art, and addresses other needs of the community as it passes through the space where the community resides, which is beautiful to think about. Yeah, that's really solid. Okay, that's probably going to be our right answer. We can quick check with D. Lori Poirier, the president of First People's Fund, said the founder of Rolling Res Arts, we had a conversation about doing something on wheels. Okay, that's just not wrapping it up. Okay, that's not wrapping it up at all. It's just moving back to the middle of the passage, which makes no sense. Our answer there would be C. Hopefully this video was helpful. If it was, make sure to like and subscribe. In addition to that, if you're looking to donate or if you're looking for my website where I offer private SAT prep, college essay brainstorming, and college essay editing, then be sure to check out the links in the description.